everybody, and welcome to All Rev'd Up with Father Dinoto. My name is Ben Barber. I am obviously not Father Dinoto. Father Tony, welcome. This is very exciting. This is your first show. I am the producer here at Christ Church, as you well know, obviously. And this is going to be your show, your weekly show from now on. But today we figured we would turn the tables and interview you so that people could get to know you a little bit. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine. This is my first foray into being a talk show host.
I'm excited, and I think that it's only fair that if this is your first foray into being a talk show host, that we start with you being a talk show guest. You know. So, tell me a little bit about your story.
Well, once upon a time, let me start from the beginning. I was born right here in Westerly, actually, in 1950, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and raised in Stonington, one of four children. Went to local schools, Stonington High Schools. After high school, I actually joined a Roman Catholic religious order, the Society of St. Edmund, and took my temporary vows there back in the late 60s. Left the order after a while. It was a tumultuous time in the church for me. I was too young and went back to college part-time and went to work. And I ended up living in a funeral home. I had an apartment over a funeral home, and I got interested in the funeral service business, and eventually went to work there, and then went off to school to get my embalmer's license, believe it or not, and eventually ended up buying the competitor funeral home in Mystic, downtown Mystic. Been in the funeral business now for 40 some years. Dinoto Funeral Home. My wife runs the business with our staff now. 1996, I went off to seminary, New York City, went to the General Theological Seminary, and walked away from being actively involved in the operation of the funeral service. I was ordained to the priesthood in Greenwich, Connecticut, my first parish at Christ Church in Greenwich. It was a modest church with 5 priests and 24 full-time lay employees, 2 organists, 5 secretaries, and a partridge in a pear tree. It was a big place.
Wow. How do you go from funeral director life to clergy?
Well,
it actually doesn't seem like that big of a leap when you think about it.
Well, I always approached my activity in the funeral service as a sort of a ministry in a way. I think church and Christ have always been a big part of my life. I had always had a wonderful relationship with all the clergy people I worked with, and I started feeling a sense of a call to being ordained, and I had got affirmation from people at the parish, and before I know it, I was a postulant in the Diocese of Connecticut. I remember writing the letter to the Bishop of Connecticut at the time, Bishop Clarence Coleridge, who died just recently, by the way. And in my letter, I said to him that I was writing to ask to be for entry into the ordination process in the diocese. I said I would feel irresponsible not to explore the possibility, Bishop. But then I said, but if you think this is a bad idea, that would be just fine with me. And he called me back. Usually they just send you a letter and say yes or no. Bishop Coleridge, I knew him as a layperson when I was in Mystic at St. Mark's. He called me back and he said, Anthony, he called me Anthony. He said, Anthony, he said, I don't get too many letters like this. Usually people tell me they hear voices in their closet or there's a light at the foot of their bed. And I said, well, Bishop, I said, what you see is what you get. And I said, this is going to really screw up my life. I said, I've got a wonderful business. young daughters and a wife who I love, and the prospect of being away for them for 3 years in seminary. So if you don't think this is a good idea, that's fine with me too. So I went off to the General Theological Seminary of the Episcopal Church in New York City, one of the oldest Episcopal seminaries in the country, in New York City and Manhattan. I started in my junior year in 1996, and I received my Master of Divinity degree in 1999, and was ordained to the diaconate at the Christ Church Cathedral in Hartford by Bishop Coleridge in June of '99. And I interviewed to be on the staff as a senior associate rector to the rector at Christ Church Greenwich, as a deacon even. And I was supposed to start in August of '99 that year. And the rector, Father Walker, called me up in July, and he said, I know you're not supposed to start until August, but why don't you come down next week and give us a hand? And I was at the beach at the time, and I said, give you a hand doing what? And he said, do you live under a rock? And I said, I must live under a big one. He said, Christ Church is hosting the Kennedy Bissett funeral next week. So my first service as a deacon officially was the Kennedy Bissett funeral in Greenwich, Connecticut. And I felt like Forrest Gump in many ways. But that's where I started my priesthood at Greenwich. And I got ordained later in January there.
Wow. So that is very Forrest Gump-esque. And I think that your what you said to the bishop of hey, if you think this is a bad idea, please let me know, because I'd love for that to happen. Not I'd love for that to happen, but like
it would simplify my life.
It would simplify your life. I've heard it said about ministry, if you can do anything else with your life, if you can do anything else with your life, do it. Like if because it'd be easier. And I think that is that's such an interesting story. So you are currently the interim rector here at Christ Church Westerly. Thank you for that, for coming in and being with us during this transitional time. This is not your first foray here at Christ Church, though. You've been here before.
During seminary, last 2 years of seminary, part of our program to get a Master's in Divinity was to find a field placement as a seminary intern in a parish somewhere. And a lot of my classmates living with me in New York worked in a seminary internship in Manhattan. There are 46 Episcopal churches in Manhattan. But in my situation, I was coming home every weekend to be with my family. I had 3 little daughters and my wife at home. So I approached Father Bob Anthony, who was the rector here, and I became the seminary intern at Christ Church. So I was here a long time ago in 1998 and 1999. And then I spent a year at Christ Church in Greenwich as an assistant. And at that point, the bishop said to me that, look, if you're going to stay here, you really need to move here. And that wasn't a possibility because we owned a funeral home that my wife ran. So I ended up being sort of an unofficial associate here in 2000. And I spent a little time here as a priest, and then went off to St. Albans Church in Danielson, Connecticut. I served as a rector there, or vicar at the time. And then I went to, did a course to study to be an intern, a rector intern, an interim rector rather. And so I served in a couple of places as an interim, Christ Church in Guilford and Epiphany in Durham. And then I got called to be the rector in Niantic in 2014. I was the full-time rector of St. John's in Niantic from 2014 to 2023.
And now you're officially retired. Congratulations, you're doing a fantastic job at retirement.
One of my Facebook friends is a classmate from seminary, and he said he just put a comment on my Facebook page, and he said, Father Anthony Dinoto is an abject failure at retirement.
Yes.
I actually retired from St. John's twice. I reached the mandatory age of 72 to retire there as rector. And then the parish wrote to the bishop and asked him to appoint me as priest in charge there to stay for another year. I did that. And then I retired again. And then lo and behold, my good friend Sunil Chandy, who was rector here at Christ Church, who started the same year here that I did at St. John's, was called to be a canon to the bishop in the Diocese of East Michigan. And very soon after that announcement that he was leaving, I got a call from the senior warden asking me if I would consider being a candidate as interim rector at Christ Church. So I met with the wardens, and then I met with the bishop. I met with Bishop Nicely, who I had never met before. And he said to me, he said, if they call you, he said, this is like the second week in July. I had just retired my second time. And he said, when could you begin? And I said, well, maybe late August. And he said, well, maybe early August. So I had about a 3-week retirement.
Well,
and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you, and apologies about your retirement, but Westerly is a beautiful place to retire if you ever get the opportunity. If we ever let you retire, that is. So can we talk for a second about humor? Because one of the things that people have noticed as soon as you stood behind the pulpit and gave your first homily here at Christ Church is how funny you are. And not that you're, cracking jokes and taking away from the seriousness of the message, but you use humor in a very powerful way during your messages. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's not something I invented. Actually, according to history, Martin Luther, who of Reformation fame, who was originally a Roman Catholic Augustinian monk, always said that every preacher should include in their presentation a bit of humor. And so I've often found it to be a good way to magnify a message, either through maybe telling a humorous story about a situation people found themselves in, or I even put cartoons in the Sunday Bulletin. I put one cartoon in and I usually try to correlate my humor with the scripture of the day. And there was a gospel reading one Sunday where Jesus talks about tells about how Jesus told the apostles where to put the net on what side of the boat or the other. And the cartoon in the bulletin was a cartoon of a fishing boat. And there's a cartoon of Jesus in the bow, and the cartoon of obviously St. Peter in the middle, and a little skinny apostle in the stern of the boat. And he was playing the castanets. And the caption is St. Peter's got his mouth open, and the caption says, "No, you idiot," he said, "cast the nets." And people don't forget those kinds of sermons.
No.
No, they don't. I don't consider use of. There's a big difference between use of humor, in my mind, as opposed to just getting up there and telling jokes, telling funny stories. Some people do that effectively, but I think that humor is a very powerful weapon, very, very, very powerful tool in many ways. Not that, it isn't my goal to, quote, leave them laughing, but hopefully I leave them thinking.
Mhm.
You know.
Um, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think that I love to preach. I think preaching is a sacred responsibility for me to stand up there in front of such a diverse congregation wherever I am, and sort of explore the scripture together with them. It's really a very organic thing, preaching. I remember the first Sunday I had to preach to a camera during the pandemic. There was absolutely no one in the pews, and it was stunning to me how difficult that was. There was no energy. There was no dynamic feeling of transaction, and I think that there is a particular energy that is exchanged in a sermon or a homily that keeps people's attention. A sermon is not a lecture, and I learned early on in my priesthood that I'm not very good at preaching from a text. So I have to do I do a lot of note taking. I do a lot of study. I read the scripture from the beginning of the week and do a lot of reading and commentaries and things like that, and then make my notes and do my homily. But I just am not able to successfully do a homily by reading it from a text.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the whatever has gone into the magic sauce for your sermons. We appreciate it because they are very much loved here at Christ Church, and we get comments from them every week. Online about how great they are, how insightful they are, how funny they are. So it's really nice. One
Well,
thing about leaving lasting impression. Oh, go ahead.
let me tell you something though, before I get a big head here. I remember at my last parish at St. John's, I'd been there for maybe 3 months, and my wife had gotten home before me, and I arrived home after the 10 o'clock service, and she said, "Oh my God, I got cornered by somebody at coffee hour, telling him I'd been there like 3 months, telling me how wonderful Father Dinoto is. Oh, he's so this, and she's so that, he's so this, blah blah blah." And my wife said, she said to the woman, "Give him 3 months. Just give him a little time." So
Yeah, that's I get that at home as well. Because we're doing so much stuff in the community,
yeah,
and so many people have wonderful things to say about me, and then I go home and they're like, "Wait till they really get to know you," you know.
that's right. That's right.
But so one of the things you said, leave them laughing. One of the things about leaving a lasting impression, and that has left a lasting impression since your first sermon here, is your granddaughter gave you some advice about your preaching that has really become a hallmark of it. Can you share what that advice was?
Well, my granddaughter Hannah, who I love to death, has been sort of my partner throughout my priesthood. I actually baptized her when she was a baby, and she's lived with my wife and I, and she was always an acolyte when she was old enough wherever I served. And at St. John's several years ago, she said to me, she came when I got home, she said, "Papa, those 2 kids you had me serve with today, they didn't know what they were doing." And I said, "Well, Hannah, you need to be sort of their mentor. You've been doing this for 3 or 4 years, and you need to teach them." And she said to me, "Papa, I need to be captain of the acolytes." So I said to her, "Hannah, I'm captain of the acolytes. When you get ordained and you get your own parish, you can be captain of the acolytes." So several years later, as a teenager, and she's still listening to my homilies and sermons, I got home one Sunday and she said to me, "Papa," I said, my first question usually is when I get home is, "Well, what did you think of the sermon today?" And my wife normally will say, "Don't ask me that every Sunday." But Hannah said one Sunday, Papa, you have to land the plane. She said, you came in for a landing 3 times and took off. So that's sort of been the guiding light that I have. So now I get people making comments to me like, well, you landed the plane really well today. So.
And yeah, it's something that people remember. I said, I think that we should make shirts that say "Land the Plane," for Christ Church, because everybody took to that saying. The name of the show, this is probably my last question for today. The name of the show is All Rev'd Up, REV''D, and that was one of the first things that I learned about you when you came in as the interim rector here, is that you prefer the abbreviation for Reverend REV''D as over REV period.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
It's very simply, it's just more of an antiquarian way to do it. It's more of an old traditional way to put Reverend.
Yeah.
There's nothing special about it. And
well,
it doesn't have any higher degree of being ordained or anything else. It's just, and it's certainly not make me any more reverend. When I was in seminary here, Father Bob Anthony, who was the rector, often would write me notes encouraging me while I was at seminary, and he would always address the notes to the nearly Reverend Anthony Charles Dinoto. I really haven't changed much, because my high school picture in my 1968 yearbook at Stonington High School, we had to pick a quote from a list of quotes. And the quote under my name in my high school yearbook is, "A little nonsense now and then is relished by the wisest of men." And I thought that was pretty appropriate 55 years ago. And it sort of kept me in good stead.
I agree. I think that is some sage advice, honestly. So this show, last thing that I want to talk about, obviously, if you have any other direction you want to take this in, you can. It's your show, not my show. But this show is your show, All Rev'd Up. Obviously, for the last 3.5 years or so, Christ Church did Food for Thought under some other guy whose name escapes me. I'm kidding. And Food for Thought is obviously that was something that went with him. And but the idea of community-based programming and having the priests in the community, talking to members of the community, talking to members of the parish, letting people know what's going on in the church was very important. So thank you. We all want to say thank you to you for continuing this tradition of community-based programming. And I'm excited for All Rev'd Up.
Can I say something? I want to give a little credit to some of my clergy colleagues in the Diocese of Connecticut. Father Walsh, who is the rector of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in New Canaan, has a very similar program called Revd Up for Sunday. And so I have to give them credit for the idea of using the title of this as All Rev'd Up. I don't want to appear to be a plagiarist, but it's a little different, and it's different enough. But they do a wonderful blog at St. Mark's. So excellent. I look forward to these. I look forward to having some guests. We might have maybe do a guest interview with Father Coutier, who's coming next weekend. I don't know if that might be possible.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, that's the goal for next week. So
yeah, he has quite a background in broadcasting in Florida, Father Coutier. Anybody wants to find out about it, just Google Alberto Coutier. It looks like cutie, but it's Cutie.
That's right. And he is colloquially known as Father Oprah in that community for all of his broadcasting acumen. And that's why we wanted to make sure that we did this episode with you today, so that your first foray into broadcast wasn't with a ministry broadcasting legend.
You know, I've been sort of shy about being in the media. When I told you I was asked to go down and give a hand at the Kennedy Bissett funeral that day, I drove into Greenwich in July of '99, and there were 5 or 6 satellite TV trucks lined up on East Putnam Avenue, right across the street from the church. And the rector had told me to park in the rectory parking lot, which I did right across the street. And I parked the car and got one foot out of the car, and there was a microphone put in front of my mouth. And I looked, and there was a man and a cameraman. And the man said to me, he's a black man, and he said to me, good afternoon, Father. He said, my name is Randall Pinkston from CBS News. He said, I wonder if we could get a quote from you. And I said, well, Mr. Pinkston, this is my first day on the job, and I really don't have anything to say. So,
yeah, that's jumping in with 2 feet for sure.
I just want to say one thing about Christ Church. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. This is a wonderful community. There's so many dedicated people, so many committed people here. The old saying is, there are lots of people here with skin in the game, and that's wonderful. And I am blessed to have a clergy colleague in Father Al Zadig, who's just been an amazing partner in ministry here with me. Maybe we'll interview him pretty soon too.
I would love that. I'm a huge fan of Father Al as well. We're excited. It's been a wonderful first 2 months having you here, and we figured we would let you get your feet wet a little bit before putting a camera in your face. We're a little bit nicer than the people at CBS News, a little bit when it comes to forcing you into the media, but we appreciate it, and we're excited to have you here and to explore what this looks like. And thank you for continuing, Christ Church's continued dedication to its online ministry. It has an unbelievable following every Sunday morning, Wednesday morning, Wednesday evening, Saturday nights, and of course, now coming back with this community programming.
Yeah. Special day on Sunday every year. The church celebrates the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. And his feast day is actually October 4th. But this Sunday, October 1st, we are going to be observing the feast of St. Francis of Assisi by offering our annual blessing of the animals at 12 o'clock here at the church. It should be interesting, and we hope for good weather. And also Sunday, October 1st, happens to be Susan and we are celebrating our 46th wedding anniversary. My wife, Susan, who is Saint Susan, born right here in Westerly also.
She must be 46 years. She must be.
She's going straight
46 years. She must be a saint. Yeah.
Yeah, she's going straight to heaven. No, do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
Well, thank you so much for doing this show, and I almost said thank you so much for being here. It's your show. I'm just hosting as a conduit to pry some information out of you today. So thank you very much for doing this.
I look forward to collaborating with you, Ben, too. God bless you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Did you know that you can join Christ Church from anywhere in the world? If you're feeling connected to what we're doing, email us today at communicate@christchurchwesterly.org.